Hello Internet, Rob from A Minor Error here with a video about the importance of automation and some automation tips and tricks that I like to do in order to kind of tweak and dial things in the context of a mix. If you're just beginning to get into mixing, or even if you've been for a little while and just looking for a couple ideas, I think I'll have a couple things that will help you out more than even just your normal kind of automation moves. I mean, you know, the most basic way of automating is just to be tweaking the fader levels so that, you know, let's say you got a guitar solo coming in, you duck your rhythm guitar slightly, and that helps kind of make room for the lead guitar so that you're not having to push it super hard to get above where your rhythm guitar is already at. Obviously, there's all sorts of other kind of moves that you could do with little fader automations like that. So this is a little demo track that I put together. It's a little original piece of music that I actually really like. I think I'm going to turn this into a real song eventually. And I'm just going to talk about some of the simpler automation moves that I did and then some of the more interesting ones that I think are really cool and, you know, really effective ways of getting everything to kind of play nice together in the context of a mix. Down below are going to be the chapters to help you skip around to the different sections. We're going to start off with the playthrough demo of this song, and then we'll talk about a couple of the different automation moves that I'm doing. Okay, so now that you've heard my little demo I made for the review of this Jericho guitar, we'll talk about automation, why you even need to automate. So obviously when you mix, you use different tools in order to basically control the different frequencies so that they kind of play well together. The most common being EQ. You know, you want to carve out the guitars in a certain way so they don't clutter up the bass. You know, you want to do the same sort of thing with the keys. Maybe you're trying to add some brightness or some sheen. You know, EQ is really going to be your go-to first thing to help kind of create a mix. The second thing would then obviously be something like compression to help control the volume of something. So in this case, this is my kick channel over here. I've got a compressor running on it to, control the dynamics or get a little bit more clickiness out of the kick. There's a whole bunch of different reasons why you would want to use compression. So EQ and compression, those are your two main tools. And then from there, saturation is kind of the other big one, I think, especially if you're mixing in in the box the way I am right now. Basically breathing in some of that analog goodness that we all kind of know and love. Two main ones that I like to use is the free one right over here, the soft tube saturation knob, and then the amazing Slate Digital tape machines. So for me, those are your main tools. You've got EQ, you've got compression, you've got saturation, and then you've got your time-based effects, reverbs, and delays. So once I get a good static mix going, that's when I move on to the automation phase. For me, the automation part is actually the most fun. It's where you kind of dial things in so that as the different elements come and go in a mix, we're not stepping over each other. Now, this being a demo, I maybe spend about 45 minutes popping the automation in. It really doesn't take that long, and then I move on with life. If it's a actual release, obviously going to spend a lot more time on it. So the most basic kind of move is, you've got a rhythm guitar set at a certain volume. So for this sort of whole part, the rhythm is at the same volume. You could really get in there and tweak it more if you wanted. And I found that volume, works well. It's kind of well balanced, I think, in this part. And then when this little layer comes in, as I'm changing from this one riff to the next section, I just want the rhythm guitars to dip down slightly to make room for the clean kind of tappy thing that comes in above it. Now this move is really, really small. I mean, how much am I even going? 7.8 to 9. So it's what, like about not even 2 dB, a dB and a half down in volume. But it just kind of helps make space for this part coming in so that I don't have to really crank this. When it enters, this makes a little bit of space. That's the basic way that you want to use automation. A little bit more involved usually for me is when it comes time for like a lead. Since this is an instrumental track, I'm not worried about vocals, but would be the same thing if you were doing a lead vocal. It's basically riding the fader so that the important sections are audible. So when I come in, this little sweepy part to enter before the solo comes in, I've got it boosted super high. It's actually the loudest in the solo so that it really cuts the mix, that you can really hear that lick as it enters. And I'm also doing the little rhythm guitar dip trick. So I'm really kind of making room here for these kind of strummy chords so that the solo can kind of sit on top. And again, I'm not like having to push that lead guitar super hard in the context of the whole mix, so we'll kind of play a little bit leading into that. And it's like the rhythm guitar part is changing here, is kind of building in intensity or, energy. So saying, I'm just bumping it a teeny little bit in volume to help, continue that idea of excitement and energy building. And then in the, really heavy kind of drop section where the solo is really kind of going off, another little bump. So all of these moves are, super obvious. There's nothing earth-shattering here going on, but these moves are unbelievably important. When you're in the static mix, there's going to be, licks and little parts in the lead that just aren't going to be cutting, or it's not going to be building in energy. It's going to sound flat. So for me, this is really what the mix is really all about is, once you've got everything EQ'd and compressed, you've got your reverbs and delays for your sense of space or width, everything's saturated so it's sounding like it was actually recorded in a real studio and not in a sterile computer scenario. This is, the icing on the cake. This is the presentation part of the mix, basically putting your best foot forward so that the listener can hear all of these little kind of tweaks. Like I said, it doesn't take long. I did all of this kind of automation, all of the automation actually in this project in less than an hour. So this is super obvious. The stuff that's not quite as obvious is the ability to really tweak and change the guitar amps especially. So one of the things that I love about using software guitar amps is the ability to automate anything. Anything you can see in a plugin can potentially be automated or manipulated on the fly. On some of my productions that I've made, I've ended up taking that to a really high extent, especially a song off my new EP called Battle of the Clouds. The lead guitars were realistically recorded kind of poorly. I was using kind of not very good guitar strings back then, and it really was affecting the tone. So I ended up having to really automate the amp hard to get it to sound and the amp to react kind of the way that I wanted it to or would have expected it to had I used better strings. Everything is a learning process. I also recorded that 4 years ago. Whatever. What are you going to do? So one of the cool things that I'm doing here is when this sort of strummy part comes along, or at least things that I think is cool, when this little strummy part comes along, I have it automated to lower the amount of gain that's hitting that rhythm guitar amp so that it kind of cleans up a bit. So in other words, I've got like the full amount of gain. It's the same part. This strummy part just happens twice. When you've got the aggressive rhythm guitar part, it just ducks the gain down slightly so that the part is a little bit clearer. You don't have too much distortion kind of washing things out. This is something you could kind of do if you were recording a guitar amp for real. You could have somebody standing by the amp and just lower the gain amount. If you're reamping, you could do it that way, but you're not going to have the same degree of control where you can decide, okay, now that I got the full mix all put together, I'm about to bounce down, but you know what, just a little bit too much distortion, no big deal. I can just go grab that, pull it down, and now I got less gain. So, this is to me where software plugins really are kind of superior in a lot of ways to using a regular guitar amp. So what I'll do is I'll just kind of solo that out with the bass. I think we'll do bass and drums and the rhythm guitars. So you can just kind of hear the difference in the tone leading in. So just pay attention to basically the saturation amount of gain. Another element that I am automating here in the guitar amp is the pitch section of this particular plugin. This is the newish one from Neuro DSP Archetype Gojira that I am absolutely in love with. I'm definitely going to be picking this one up. It's got this pitch section in here. So I'm basically using this to kind of fatten up that little riff leading into the the solo. So what I'll do is just kind of move this over here. And that is the wow active button, which you can see is on right now. And basically in this riff, that is on. And then when it hits this part here, I'm simultaneously lowering the gain, turning that off, and also disabling a chorus pedal that I'm running over here as well, which I've got automated. So all of that is sort of happening in the background, more or less. So all of that at the same time, paired with a slight volume change. So, there's a decent bit going on there. And again, it's quick and easy to do. This doesn't take long. You just draw it in real quick and I like this because it feels much more streamlined than having to have many different rhythm guitar channels. Right now, I only have one rhythm guitar channel for all of these different parts. And when the different sections come up, I just automate the subtle changes that I want, either in the gain amount, the volume amount, the effects that are put on it. There's two last elements that I automated in this mix just to help get a little bit more control, which was just the kick volume. I felt like in certain sections, I wanted it to be louder than others, so I was automating the actual kick so that it's louder and quieter in certain parts. So the last element that I automated was the actual limiter. Sometimes as different elements kind of come in and out, it's easy to end up getting sort of a buildup of frequencies, and then you get like a little bit of a clip or distortion on the limiter. So, this is a cool little trick just to kind of help eliminate that. If you happen to have a little bit of distortion, a quick automation on the limiter will help fix that. So that wraps up the video. Hope you guys learned a couple things today, a couple little tips and tricks. There's obviously loads of other things that you could potentially automate and do in the context of a mix, which is really, ultimately is the controls. It's kind of like, I almost think of it as like your fingers on the mix, being able to change all the different knobs and whatever to get them to kind of play well together as a group. So hopefully you learned a couple things from the video. Hopefully you liked my little demo as well. And I guess take it easy.